Good morning, and welcome to another episode of Soul Talk Radio. So, today we're going to be discussing or unmasking perfectionism and procrastination because the two of them are definitely linked. And so, we'll discuss that today. So, first of all, what causes perfectionism? Typically, if you grew up in an environment, that you didn't necessarily feel safe to make a lot of mistakes, or you were held at very high standards, that can often result in perfectionistic tendencies. And I think that a lot of us struggle with that. So, a quote that I pulled offline says that perfectionism is driven primarily by internal pressures, such as the desire to avoid failure or harsh judgment. So, that perfectionism at this point may have been created from something that happened in childhood, but now it's being perpetuated by our own mind, our own thoughts about those things. We're very afraid of being judged, and so a lot of times we just don't even try. We procrastinate on projects because we're so afraid of getting it wrong. It's very common. So procrastination and perfectionism are both self-protection techniques, right? It's kind of like saying to yourself, you procrastinate because you're like, well, if I'm not perfect, people will judge me. So you just don't even do it, because if I don't make mistakes, then nobody will have anything to point out as bad, right? And I struggle with perfectionism all the time, even my house. So I keep my house very, very organized. One of those reasons is because I suffer from object permanence, which is if I don't see something, it is completely gone from my mind. So I try and keep my pantry and my closets very organized so I can see what's there. But it's also a perfectionistic quality. And I notice that about myself. I don't think that it's a bad thing that my home is organized. I think that it's helped me in a lot of ways. However, I do notice it as being something that is a perfectionistic tendency. So, as I said in the beginning, perfectionists are often procrastinators. I can't tell you how long I procrastinated on creating certain projects, going after certain things, because I was afraid. I was so afraid it wouldn't be perfect, that people wouldn't like it, that nobody would come, nobody would listen. I would have really negative thoughts such as, who am I to create that? Nobody's going to listen to me, that sort of stuff. It's what made me procrastinate on creating my book. I had the idea to create my book 8 years ago, and I started like writing on little post-its, little notes that I wanted to put in there, or creating voice memos of all of these things that I wanted to say. And then finally, 2 years ago, during the pandemic, I started actually combining all of those notes, combining all of those voice memos into my book. And now finally my book is in the stage of being published. So and I look at my book all the time. I think that I was just talking to a fellow author about this, that sometimes I'll read my book, like if I haven't touched it in a while, I'll go back and read parts of it, and I'll have thoughts like, this is crap. This is such BS. What am I doing? Like, don't put this out into the world. But then other times I'll read it and I'm like, wow, this is fabulous. Like, you really need to submit this. And it's so funny how it goes through waves. But if I had continued to focus on the thoughts such as, wow, this is crap, because every single author, every single creator, every single artist of any kind has those thoughts. If I had focused on those thoughts, I would have never submitted anything. I would have never started this podcast. I would have never became a meditation instructor. I would have never pursued creating my business that I now have. Like, all of the fear, all of the fearful thoughts that I was experiencing had to do with the fact that I was so afraid of being judged. And again, that's where our perfectionistic and procrastination tendencies come in. It's fear. It's fear. And it's a human shared experience. A lot of us, so many of us struggle with that, but it's fear. And one thing I wanted to share with you guys is, so when I first created back in 2019 when I first became an instructor on the Insight Timer app and I created my first guided recorded meditation. It was the first time I had ever used my microphone. I think I had a different microphone than this one. And it was the first time that I'd ever used my editing software. And I was so scared. And when I created that meditation, I actually created it during a moment where I was at work and I was just really, really stressed. And I did those breathing techniques and those affirmations for myself. And I thought, oh, I have to create this. But once I did and I posted it, I started noticing all of the little imperfections in the recording, like, because again, it was my first time using that software. Like I cut my voice off too soon, or I maybe cut the music off a little bit, or you hear a little bit of background noise, or, I wish I would have changed up the breathing technique a little bit or whatever. Again, all of those perfectionistic tendencies coming in that I think it's not perfect. But the funny thing is, that meditation is still a favorite on the app. It's still a recommended meditation on the app. And I get at least 2 or 3 comments daily on that meditation about how much people love it. They don't see the imperfections. And goosebumps. Like I think about that all the time. The fact that anytime I listen to that meditation, I see all of the tiny little, in my mind, perceived imperfections. Nobody else notices it. We're always our own worst critic. And, people, a lot of times we stop ourselves from putting out our work because we don't think that it's perfect. And then people don't even notice those things. They just love it. They love what we've created. And I see it so often in other artists that create things and put it out into the world, right? Like I've actually seen videos of artists like putting their artwork in front of you and like, yeah, well, I messed up here and I messed up here. And it's like, we didn't even notice that. Don't even point it out. All we see is something beautiful that you've created, and your mind is making it out that it has to be perfect when it's already perfect exactly as it is. And so we need to allow ourselves to make mistakes. There's this video going around online of a woman and her baby. I think the baby's maybe a year old, maybe a year and a half. And she's like making a coffee for herself. And then she makes like a fake coffee for the baby and allows the baby to pour her own coffee. And again, it's not actual coffee. She's just allowing the baby to participate. And the baby goes to pour either the coffee or the cream and she spills it. And the mother goes, "That's okay. That's okay." And so many people online have duetted that video because it was like triggering in a way, because a lot of people were going back to their childhood and thinking like, I may not have had that same reaction from my parents. They may have said, "Be careful next time," or, had a sharp reaction. And in those moments where we felt like we couldn't make mistakes, which again, so many of us have struggled with that, that's what's creating those perfectionistic tendencies, right? We feel like we can't be human, that we can't make mistakes. And, it takes some doing to move past that and to create new neural networks in the brain and more positive thoughts about ourselves. And one of the ways that we do that is by, I know you've heard this term before, by reparenting ourselves. So it's reparenting that inner voice, right? That inner voice that's saying those negative things to us when we quote unquote fail, or when we quote unquote make something that isn't perfect, which perfect doesn't exist. It's a myth. There's no such thing as perfect. So when you make a mistake, no matter how small, and I've started doing this with myself, it could be when you spill something, when you trip, when just think of all the tiny little so-called mistakes that you make throughout your day. And then once you make that mistake, I want you to recall the thoughts that you're telling yourself. Are they things such as, "Oh, I'm so stupid," or, really negative, criticizing thoughts? Just examine that first. We have to become aware first that we're thinking those negative thoughts. And then I'd like for you to try and reparent yourself. Think to yourself, how would if there was a child standing in front of me and they had made that same mistake, how would I respond to them? I would respond to them lovingly, right? Like, "It's okay. We all make mistakes. It's okay." Speak to yourself the same way. Okay? Speak to yourself the same way you would a small child who made a mistake. We're reparenting that inner child within all of us. I know we all look like adults, but we're all still struggling with and working through stuff that happened in our childhood, and reparenting ourselves is a beautiful way to do that. So, and also saying things like, mistakes happen, try again next time, I love you. Those are all really good affirmations to tell yourself the next time you make a mistake. So, I found a really great article on positivepsychology.com on how to overcome perfectionism, and I wanted to read you a few of the things that they recommend. So, one is reassigning tasks. Perfectionists can find it difficult to let go of control. They don't want to hand over work for fear that it will not be done properly. I struggle with that. So, learning to enjoy handing over tasks to other people and being relieved of the decision-making burden. Ask yourself, am I best placed to do this? Would my time be better spent elsewhere? Could someone else step up to be accountable for this task? Most likely the answer is yes. There's a lot of tasks at work in particular that I wish I could delegate to others, and I am working to do so, and I have. There's also tasks within my own business that over time I know I'll be able to delegate to others as my business grows, and I am actually really looking forward to that. Another thing that kind of popped in my head just now is we as humans, we have certain strengths, right? And like my strengths are creating really beautiful visual guided meditations. That's one of my strengths. One of my weaknesses is like doing the billing. I'm good at math. I like math, but it's not that I'm bad at it. It's just not something that I enjoy, right? And I would be fine with passing that off to another person for it to be done beautifully, properly. Not that I don't do it properly, I do, but you know what I mean. And like handing off those tasks that, looking at the list of stuff that we're really great at and that we strive and we that is our strengths, kind of our strengths list, and then our weaknesses list. And what can we take off our weaknesses list and give to somebody who's stronger at that particular task? I think is a really great way to kind of figure out how you want to delegate something. So another thing on this list, it says, stop over delivering. It can be tempting to think, if I'm not over delivering, I'm under delivering, and it's unlikely. If given time, resources, and payments to complete a piece of work, perform it well, but your standards and time investment should not be disproportionate to its value. Also recognize that a client may not expect you to reply within 2 hours, and if you are paid to work a day's work, it should not be extended into the remainder of the week. Depending on the task, try and focus on areas where you can add the most value according to the time and resources agreed upon. The next one says 100% consistency is unlikely. You may find you avoid trying a new habit unless you know you can achieve perfectionism as of day one. This can lead to procrastination and avoidance because, again, you fear not doing it properly. I just did a meditation this morning where I talked about, we had them visualize like creating a project. Possibly it's a book you want to write or a hobby that you want to start, and it doesn't have to be perfect. One thing that I have really wanted to start is I've been considering, I've always wanted to play the piano, and I've been considering purchasing like a used keyboard to just try and practice playing the piano. And there was part of me that was like, but you're not going to be any good at it, and you're not going to be good for a while. Like those thoughts started coming up. And I thought, like I spoke back to those thoughts like, no, duh, I'm a beginner and it's okay. And it's okay to be a beginner at things. And there is no such thing as perfect, and I am still going to make mistakes. Even if I become a really good piano player, I'm still going to make mistakes. Like mistakes are a part of life. And we have to stop beating up on ourselves for that and start again speaking to ourselves like we were a small child and being flexible. So the last thing that they mention here is recognize you can take time off from working towards your goals, especially if you are starting to feel burnt out. God, I feel like we've all struggled with burnout as of recently. And this is a very good point. I don't bring up, um, I notice that we are going through a very hard time, obviously, as a collective society right now. And this isn't to, push you to do something that you literally do not have the mental capacity to pursue right now. However, I know that there are things in your life that you want to pursue. However, you're not pursuing it just because of fear, right? And I want to assure you that is such a shared collective experience. And you're afraid of it not being perfect, so you just don't even pursue it at all. But it is okay to just start from where you are, and I promise you the rest will fill itself in along the way. When I first started writing my book, again, I would have those thoughts like, this is such crap, and I don't know how to organize this, and what am I doing? Um, and then over time, it kind of started to, I would read certain articles, speak to different friends. How can I organize this? Gain inspiration from different places. And over time, I became a better writer. I became better at organizing it. It wasn't perfect the first time that it came out onto paper. Nothing is. But if I was to look at that thing, the second that I allowed it to come up onto a Word document and I looked at that and I thought, this isn't perfect, this is crap, and I closed my computer screen and never touched it again, I wouldn't have this book that I'm getting ready to, offer to the world. So you have to just allow yourself to be imperfect. It's not going to be perfect at first, I promise you. No matter, nothing that you start will be perfect when you first start it. Nothing. And it never will be perfect. There's no such thing. So again, speaking to yourself as if you were a child, allowing yourself to make mistakes, so-called mistakes, allowing yourself to not be perfect. And I hope that this episode helped you. That's all for today. And if you enjoyed this episode, please comment, like, share, and subscribe. I record these episodes every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then they are available on major podcasting platforms on Monday at 7 a.m. if you missed the live recording. So if you like this content, or you have a question, please like, review, comment, share, subscribe. May you be happy, may you be well, may you be joyous and at ease. And until next time.